Welcome to Automail Terrace Radio TV. We're lifelong Catholics, and we do this all for free and for our love of Jesus Christ and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to do our first episode of our new series on what is real Catholicism with Brother Alexis Corona, and we're going to touch on Timothy John Gordon.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. And in addition to that, we'll talk about, in this program, daily current misinformation about the Catholic faith that you're finding on social media. And since now it's just pouring out of almost every source, if you're a Catholic, especially if you're a young Catholic and you're trying to learn something about the Catholic faith, you're getting a lot of misdirection from people who are making lots of money on social media. So our first program, we're going to talk about Timothy Gordon, who is a public speaker, has his own channels. I think his YouTube channel is called Rules for Radicals, and he frequently appears on Church Militant. And he caught the interest of AJ and myself the other day for one of the most outrageous tweets that have ever been tweeted by any Catholic on social media, claiming to be a Catholic speaker, someone who promotes the Catholic faith. So let's start there, and then we'll follow this down the rabbit hole.
So I asked him, is it moral to deny the help of a Christian country founded in 1000 AD, to let it be bombed, let the people be raped, tortured, and murdered? And then he said, 99 out of 1,000% it is moral, I believe.
Yeah, 99 times out of 1,000, I would advocate, I think, non-intervention. And he said this just a few days before Christmas. Was it December 22nd or 23rd? You know, just as we're contemplating the Son of God coming down from heaven to save our sorry arses. And I wonder if he sat there and after the Father commanded him to do that and said, you know, well, is that, you know, what's the likelihood I should do that? How many times out of 1,000 should I do it? I think we all know by our Catholic faith, it was 1,000 out of 1,000 times he would do it. And I'm particularly irked that he chose 999 times. It's not right, because that's the number 666 turned upside down. So I can't think of any ideologic or moral reason a Catholic should ever say that 999 out of 1,000 times he wouldn't help his neighbor who's being threatened with genocide, rape, and murder. I can't, you know, is that an idea that comes from the Crusaders, AJ?
No.
Does it come from the Spanish who took back their country from the Moors?
No.
Does it come from your family defended France from the plains of Tours to the French Revolution? Does it? Is there any Catholic monarch in all of Western European history, Eastern European history, would have agreed with that?
No.
What would Jan Sobieski, who saved Vienna from the Ottomans, say about that?
I can't use this language.
Okay. And I can tell you, because I've read most of the manuals of moral theology in Latin, you don't find that anywhere. It's just completely foreign. And it's so diametrically opposite to Catholic teaching that you would have to say it's satanic. It's exact inversion of Catholic teaching. That kind of sound Masonic to you, AJ?
Yeah, it did.
Now, so in an attempt to understand this, because our Lord Jesus Christ teaches us, and we should heed his word, out of the fullness of the heart does the mouth speak. I can't quote you exactly what passage of the gospel that is, but you search it in Bible Hub, you'll find it. So that means something in Tim Gordon's family history is leading him to say that, because Well, let's find out. Who is Tim Gordon? AJ, you did a research. Um, we won't divulge any information that's personal to identify him, but where did he go to school? We'll start with that because if you go on the internet, the strangest thing about Tim Gordon is wherever you go, you don't find a biography, except a few words that are duplicated on every site, copy and paste. Copy and paste. You
Yeah.
know,
So
AJ and I often talk about our family backgrounds. We don't hide anything. AJ talks about, but it will tell you more than 1,000-year history of his family. But Tim Gordon, he's like unknown. So that sparked my curiosity. I said, AJ, go. What can you find? And what did you find, AJ, about Timothy? First of all, what is his name? Is his name Tim?
depending what LinkedIn profile you go to of him, it's either Tim Gordon, Timmy John Gordon, or Timothy John Gordon.
Okay, so Timothy John Gordon sounds to be his real name. What do you mean? So he has more than one LinkedIn profile?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, really? So do they all show the same Tim Gordon or they show different Tim Gordons?
Mm, different versions of Tim Gordon.
So he's changed his persona over the years. So the oldest one, who is the Tim Gordon shown in the photo?
I would have been what he when he had his first kid at Christmas time, where he's holding him. He's in all black, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, he looks kind of like gothic punk, right?
Yeah.
And very young. And then the next photo is very different, isn't it?
Hell yeah, the one that says Tim Gordon, where he was a landman for an energy company, where he has a
Okay.
collar, nice collar, and but it looks like either he's in South Africa or Italy by the style of the locks.
Okay, yeah. Oh, the one with the city in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one with the door in the apartment. Yeah. So he's standing next to an open door, and I've rented apartments in Rome, an apartment in Rome, so I think that's a door lock from where he stayed somewhere in the Rome area. And then there's another picture of him that you can find on the internet where he has like a little Spanish goatee, long hair on both sides. He's wearing like a jacket, and there's like a scene from it looks like Italy behind him. And he almost kind of looks like he was imitating D'Artagnan from the Three Musketeers in the way he was doing himself, but he's not French.
Mm-mm.
And we've wondered what his ethnicity is, and it's highly likely that his mother, though we can't be for certain, is Hispanic, and that's something he's never talked about. But that's the only way you can really explain his facial things, because Gordon, as a family name, were the only two possible sources of that family name, AJ.
So we have the Gordons can be Scottish, but he doesn't look
Mhm.
Scottish.
No, he doesn't.
So
Certainly
that
does not.
leaves only one possibility. Lithuanian Jewish.
Yeah, so there's a town in Belarus, which is
Mhm.
former part of Lithuania, called Grodno. And the variation, this way the Jews from that town spell the name, they spell it Gordon. But where did all those Jews from Grodno go, AJ? Where did they immigrate to?
They went to Western Belarus. Western. So yeah, they went to Western Belarus.
But what country did they immigrate to in modern times?
Russia. The United States.
No, South Africa.
Yeah,
South
South
Africa.
Africa. I love that.
Okay, so you'll see, I don't know if AJ will use the picture here, but maybe he'll share it on the program notes. We found a very famous Gordon in South Africa who was a cricket player,
Yeah.
and he looks a lot like the Gordon brothers.
hmm
What was his name and what is his ethnicity?
Norman Gordon. And so he was a famous cricketer. He was what we call in American baseball a pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you, as I say, his bowling or pitching was unhittable.
Okay. And what was his ethnicity?
Jewish.
Yeah, okay. So now we'll come to Tim Gordon's family in the United States. Um, um, what can we say about it before we do Tim Gordon's life? It appears that his mother's side comes from Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
Seems likely. And his father's side is from like northern Idaho or Montana. But the family went and lived in Bakersfield, California, which is home of the oil industry, the oil fields in California. And his father founded like an oil exploration company and
Yeah. The Golden Petroleum Company or something. Yeah.
mhm. And his father appears to have been a geologist for many years, the oil industry. What companies did his father work for? It was
So Oxy Petroleum,
Occidental Petroleum.
yeah,
Mhm.
what was it Arco,
Arco.
um, Exxon,
Exxon. So all the big names. Occidental Petroleum is Rockefeller, so is Exxon, and many years for them. And he seems to have been very successful businessman, a geological survey and analyst, and made a hoopla of money because his house in northern Idaho is worth 750,000. Then there's the house in Bakersfield that's worth another 400,000, and
mm-hmm.
then so. Timothy Gordon, he grows up and he decides to go to college. And where did he go to college, AJ?
So he goes to San Diego Law School.
No, not before Sandy. Oh, before San Diego, his undergraduate years.
Oh yeah, so he goes to the Gregorian.
Well, before the Gregorian, even going back, before the Gregorian, he goes to Texas University at Dallas.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's where he gets undergraduate degree in literature. And the it appears his father bought a house there just so
Yeah.
his son could get home. Maybe his father was already working in Texas at that time. And the house is valued at $450,000. So of course it wasn't that value then back in 1999 when Tim went off to college and
Mm-hmm.
he was there until like 2003. But where is the campus of Texas University at Dallas? It's not at Dallas, is it?
Plano, Texas, home of Freemasonry in Texas.
And what? And this was like the year before you know who got elected.
Yeah, George Bush Jr.
Junior, and he's from what town in Texas?
Plano.
So he was like living right down the road from the future president, and somehow he got there the year before he was elected,
Mm-hmm.
the fall before he ran. And as far as we can figure out, it was at the University of Texas that Tim meets his girlfriend and future wife.
Yep.
And for privacy, we won't name her name. And that's probably the picture of him with his newborn son is probably going to be somewhere around the Christmas of the year 2000, because if he goes there in the fall of 1999, then he meets his girlfriend and they marry right away, then that would be the earliest Christmas. Of course, it could be 2002, who's to say? But the interesting thing is he joins a club at Texas University of Dallas. At least we believe that's where he joins it, and it's had a profound influence on his life. What is that club?
The Federalist Society.
Now, what is the Federalist Society? Since most Catholics probably don't know what that is.
Yes, I mean,
Who
I'm just,
founded it? What is their
yeah,
objectives? What's their ideology?
there we go. It was founded in 1982 by students at Yale Law School, Harvard Law School, University of Chicago Law School. The Federalist Society began as a student organization which challenged what founding members perceived as an orthodox American liberal ideology common to American law schools. The group force activity was a 3-day symposium titled A Symposium on Federalism, Legal and Political Ramifications, held at Yale in April of 1982.
So that's very interesting. And Tim might have gotten interested in law because I think his aunt, not quite sure, but he seems to have an aunt who's a professional lawyer. And so after the University of Dallas, he goes on and gets, where he got a BA in literature, he goes on and gets a master's in philosophy at Marymount, which is a liberal school in the East. And then he goes on to get a doctorate, PhL, in systematic philosophy from, you mentioned the University in Rome.
Yeah, the Gregorian.
The Gregorian, which is Jesuit stronghold. They might teach sane philosophy in Gregorian, but they certainly don't teach Catholic faith in the theology department. Everyone who comes out of there should be suspect of heresy. It's so whacked out. To show you how whacked out it is, I had only a slight reputation of being a Catholic. They wouldn't even give me the paperwork to sign up for any courses at the Gregorian back in 2013. So it shows you what kind of reputation of people they take there. So then that wasn't. He has a lot of education. So he's gotten his undergraduate degree in Texas. He got a graduate degree at Marymount, and he's not a stupid guy because he went for two masters at once at Marymount, and then he went on for his doctorate at the Gregorian, and well, you'd have to do it in Italian, I think, to say. And then after that's not the end of his education. He goes back to the United States, and what does he study?
Law at San Diego University.
Yeah, and he gets a Juris Doctor of Law, so he gets a doctorate of law. It's not just a simple law degree. And so there he had 4 degrees. Now, you know, my family is lower middle class. I couldn't even go to college. It wasn't my grandfather, and his estate left me money, so I only have 1 degree, a bachelor's. Okay, so then, and I can tell you that used up all the money he left me. That was back in the 80s. Things are more expensive now. So here he spent at least $200,000 on his education so far, I would say, considering the time in which he studied and where he studied at. But he goes on to the law, gets that final law degree at San Diego. And probably where he picks up his California. Well, he's grew up in California, so I don't know if the University of San Diego is a state school. Maybe he got some kind of special funding there because he was a state resident.
Yeah.
So then what does he do? What's his job history?
So he works at let me get my email open up here. Yeah, right. So he wasn't always talking about the faith. He was let's see here. He was land intern for Era Energy LLC.
What year was that?
January 17th, 2013 to October 18th, 2021.
Okay, so he was a landman, so he seems to be following in the footsteps of his father, or maybe working with his father. What other jobs did he hold before he held any law positions?
So we're not sure. We're probably sure it's not the South African company, which shares the same name, same every title, same color scheme on the website as the California Royal Energy, because there's 2 different ones, one in South Africa and one in California. So I believe he worked at the California Royal Energy as a landman a year later.
And as a landman, he could be using his law studies because it might have to do with property rights and the transfer of titles and things of that sort. And so then he was also at Bakersfield. He was a professor at Bakersfield College, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what did he teach there?
Philosophy.
Philosophy. Okay. And And that takes us up to what year? 20.
So we got 2008 to 21. So right around there when Black Lives Matter came on the scene, he started saying things against Black Lives Matter. And then he was fired from his job because of Black Lives Matter, saying stuff
Mhm.
to the dean, or I think, yeah, dean of the college. And so he sells his house in Bakersfield, and they pick up and move him and his 6 kids and his wife to Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Okay, so that's a very unusual move, California to Hattiesburg. But since I have friends in the Midwest, in addition to AJ, I know something about why people moving back and forth from California to the Midwest. It does happen, though. His family has no history that we can find. And about Hattiesburg, Hattiesburg is a 53% black town, and it has some interesting things. It's actually on the Amtrak rail line. Where does that Amtrak rail line go to?
That thing goes from Texas. I think it used to go from Texas, maybe to California. Back when I was in college, I had friends who were riding the rails to go back home. And it was like, and I was looking at the map with them. So from Texas, Mississippi, all the way up to the East Coast.
Yeah, so he has on a direct line to Washington, D.C. So Hattiesburg, and in Hattiesburg, he bought a $439,000 house. Maybe he got it for 338,000, but he bought it in cash. So this guy is not from some poor family, and it's not a beggar. And so I assume he's making an income as a lawyer working for his father's consulting firm, although I think his father is recently retired
Yeah.
and his mother's passed away.
So
And
then he
go
adds
ahead.
on to the property of that house. So he buys 2 lots to extend the
Okay. Well,
property.
yeah, he either bought them separately or bought them in the deal that he bought the house on. And um, so he lives out of town. And Hattiesburg has a Masonic lodge. It's the Hub Lodge. But then he appears on the social media scene. I think it was like in 20, what was it? It was like 2017. He started doing skateboards with Our Lady underneath of Guadalupe.
Yeah.
And when I first saw a social media post and go, this seems to be like some guy who didn't grow up and he was a California skateboarder. I didn't know anything about him being a lawyer, a landman, coming from a family that was wealthy. Why would you be selling skateboards, for with images of Our Lady Guadalupe on it? It was like bizarre, but he was not really representing his social class was coming from. He was coming from a much higher social class than he appeared. Then he started did he write his book Rules for Radicals first, or did he start his YouTube channel first, AJ? You've been a fan for him for years, you know.
So he started it as a partnership with uh, Dr. Taylor Marshall, where they did their own shows together. Then 2 years after that, they separated. Then Gordon started doing his own YouTube podcasting, rules for retrogrades. Um,
And recently he's been taking up as a speaker on what network?
um, Church Militant. They'll have him on, or they'll have Christine Nels and Michael Boris on, and
Okay. So this is the interesting thing. We know it's a known fact that Taylor Marshall was an Anglican priest. The year after he was taken by the Archdiocese of Washington. Then he was boosted to stardom with EWTN, and highly likely that was through Opus Dei contacts. So whether Taylor Marshall's still with the Opus Dei or not, we know Opus Dei has gotten billions of dollars from the CIA to promote ideological warfare programs around the world, and they control dozens of magazines, news outlets, and stuff. And they're all about mind control, control within the internal forum through confessions, through clergy, and put people in positions where they push an agenda. And there's also been a lot of investigations of church militants' contact with Opus Dei by Randy Engels. I can't say it's definitive, but it raises lots of questions, shared addresses that show that Michael Vorse was probably getting lots of money from Opus Dei, and both Taylor Marshall and church militants share another thing with Tim Gordon. They are diehard Republicans, and that goes on with the Federalist Society. But Tim Gordon wrote a book called The Catholic Republic that was reviewed, a rather good review, I'd say, where they just took his book apart because what's the outrageous thing that he's trying to argue in that book?
That he's for regicide, which is in favor of killing the king.
Yeah, so regicide, the idea that you would kill a Catholic king to establish a republic, a free republic. His book, Catholic Republic, is basically saying what the Masons did in the United States or in France is what Catholics should rally about because that's the real Catholic position. Well, the critique of his book, and AJ will put a link on the show page today for today's program, just totally disassembles that and shows that is a complete inversion of historic reality. Catholics have always been in favor of monarchy, and Catholics have always been opposed to the revolution, in the Masonic sense of revolution, overthrowing a Catholic king. Catholic monarchies were highly just, well-organized societies, and defenders of the church and of normality as well as morality, and of course of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ's teaching and his reign and his social reign. So to write a book and try to push that, I'd say he's probably one of the most dangerous ideologues in Catholic media because anyone who's advocating regicide is not a Catholic at all. He's not even a Christian. And to put that in print and sell thousands of copies and to claim that there's anything upright about that's a mortal sin for every book you sell. And this is a man who is doesn't have a soul or a conscience, that you could advocate the killing of an innocent monarch. You advocate the killing of a monarch whatsoever, assassination is immoral. All the books of Catholic morality says assassination is wrong. It's under the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, in the sense of thou shalt not murder. It's quite different to say you don't think monarchy is a good system or that you think corrupt monarchs should be overthrown. But when you use the word regicide, that means kill. And that's murder. And you can't advocate murder and be a Christian. You're contradicting the law of Christ. What does our Christ say? If you love me, keep my commandments. And all the fathers and doctors of the church understand those words are the 10 commandments that Christ gave Moses on Sinai. So here we have someone who he's in the Federalist Society. He's advocating the regicide of kings. You can't call that Catholic. You would have to say that's Masonic, don't you, AJ?
Yeah. And
now,
yeah. So when
you're a relative of most of the Catholic kings of Europe, what do you think of that position?
When I saw that and when you pointed it out to me, I was like, no wonder he doesn't want to have me on this program because I'm opposed to everything he wants to do.
Yeah, that's why he won't talk about Catholic Party for America, because Catholic Party America doesn't advocate the killing of monarchs. How any Catholic could do that? Now, AJ and I we were born and raised Catholic, and we try to be true to the faith. We don't insert our own opinions, just repeat church's teachings. But this man is highly dangerous to the intellectual formation of anyone. I would imagine anyone who follows his opinion would end up joining the Masonic Lodge. I don't see how the Masons would refuse him.
Yeah.
That's one of their essential tenets. You have to be in favor of regicide. Because they're the ones involved in all. This is the ones who perpetrated it in so many countries around the world. Why did Church Militant not look into this? What is this rules? I didn't like his rules for radical because his monogram for rules for radicals has the skull and bone symbol on it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it does. So these are. We're not saying he is a Mason. We're not saying that he is consciously a Satanist, or we're not saying he's a government agent put in to Catholic media to promote him. So in the future, he runs for political office and takes the Hispanic up or traditional Catholic vote for him. We're not saying any of that, but we're saying that this guy doesn't have the credentials to be a speaker on Catholic topics. He's never studied Catholic theology. He doesn't know anything about Catholic morality. And he's not really an intellectual. He hasn't worked for a law firm, so even in his own profession, they never thought him qualified to work in a law firm. He tried to clerk for one, but and but what irks me as a friar is he begs for money on social media. He's from a very wealthy family. His family must have wealth in the somewhere between 5 and 7 million in assets. That's my estimation. I'm not a forensic accountant, but that's the impression I get as an anthropologist from all the properties his father owns. And if he bought the house in Mississippi in cash, maybe he did it with his own money, or maybe his father wants the grandkids to have a nice place to live, so maybe the father put up the money. Yeah. But you shouldn't be begging money. I mean, that's just shameful. You're a lawyer. Get a job.
Yeah. His father's work at Oxy Petroleum, which has connections to, I don't know, Zapata Oil Company of George Herbert Walker Bush, in which also has controls with British Petroleum.
Yeah, and the Rothschilds had an investment at Oxy for a while too. Now, there's one curious thing that we can't explain, and AJ's asked Tim to explain it on social media, and Tim has not responded. But I think we need to mention this, and not to be disrespectful, but Tim has a brother who is also a lawyer and grew up in California. But the strange thing about his brother is, and we don't know if this is true, but the information we're finding shows that his brother went to high school and college where?
Pretoria, South Africa.
And what's the name of the college?
The college is University of Cape Town.
Okay, but the college in Pretoria is called St. Albans, and the university is the Catholic. Now, St. Albans College is an high Episcopalian, and it's a music school. So maybe he went there to study music. But in the years he went there, South Africa was falling apart. The Black radical Marxist Party had taken over the government, and the whole thing was just going to pot. And he was only like a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old kid. His father sends him to that boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
That's difficult. And then for his undergraduate degree, he goes to University of Cape Town. So, one possible explanation is the family in those years was living in South Africa. His father was working for some company in South Africa. That's possible, but we find no evidence of that. And so the other possibility is that Dave had some kind of a problem as a juvenile, and the father felt it's best to get him away from his friends and have him grow up in another country far enough away from him as possible. That would have been a good decision on his father, but that's pure speculation on my part. We have no access to his juvenile record. Even if he had one, maybe he was just a victim and threatened by a gang, who's to say. So this is Timothy Gordon, and you understand more why maybe he doesn't publish his biography now. And now you understand where he's coming from. So when you hear him talk, remember, the persona you see is not who he is. He's not poor. He's not ragged. He's not a kid off the street. He's not a skateboarder. He's not a radical. He comes from a big oil family that have done well and are sufficiently wealthy that he doesn't need to beg for you. And academically, from the point of the opinions he's pushing, he has no intellectual honesty that you would start quoting, asserting the position he has in his book, Catholic Republic, trying to repackage the French Revolution and claim that's Catholic. But this is the general mode of agenda we see on social media. And since this program is about real Catholicism, we'll finish. That's the end of our report on Tim. But I want to talk about a few other strange tweets that are going out there, because we talked about the ideologic warfare program, AJ, in the Catholic Church. We just finished our series on that. What is the goal of that DoD CIA program?
To reform, remake the Catholic Church into their own control center, where they control our beliefs, our thought system, our faith. And funny enough, I think it was Hillary Clinton, when she was running for president, she said we need to change the Bible and change how people believe. I was like, why is she saying that back then? And we finally figured it out.
Yeah. So in other words, it's Masonic infiltration of the Catholic Church. It's to turn the Catholic Church into a Masonic lodge, and we see that happening all over. But whenever you see a social media tweet from an anonymous account that is repackaging secularism as Catholicism, you have the fingerprints of the CIA DoD program. And I want to point out a tweet. This is Christmas Day, December 25th, from an account called Mazula05. He calls himself Trad Cad Nick. And he tweets out the collected works of J.R.R. Tolkien, who was a Catholic. But this is what he says. Question: does Tolkien count as spiritual reading? Now that seems like an innocuous tweet, but that is one of the most blasphemous, anti-Catholic things you can say, because those books are all novels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're all secular literature in the sense of they're not about Jesus Christ. It's about a world without God. It's about a world of gods and demigods and spirits and demons and orcs and monsters. It's a fantasy world based on Nordic mythology. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you might argue, well, that it is intended through the medium of Norse mythology to teach certain Catholic truths or to correct certain errors in modern times. But it certainly doesn't count as spiritual reading unless you're a Satanist.
Mm-hmm.
Because those books have inspired lots of people to go into the dark arts, the dark crafts, and involved in the satanic and the demonic. So Tradcad Nick is not at all a Tradcad. He might be a Tradcad, but what he's preaching is Freemasonry. He's preaching the repackaging of demonism as spiritual reading.
Mm-hmm.
That is an extremely dangerous tweet. Any young person see that, he's going to get misled. And I think I'm perfectly objective in my commentary, because one of the first novels I read as a 17-year-old kid was The Lord of the Rings. I read that and The Silmarillion, and I also read The Hobbit. So I read all those books when I was also doing spiritual reading, like St. Alphonsus, the Doctors and Fathers of the Church. Would I even think of calling those books spiritual reading? Not in a million years. Mm-hmm. Spiritual reading is something you bring in the chapel and you could read in front of the Blessed Sacrament. You can't do that with The Lord of the Rings. And if you think you can, it's just totally whacked out. And have you seen any other crazy tweets in recent days, AJ, that just are white off the rails, as we say?
I can name hundreds of those by Catholics who were advocating to protecting of the Russian oligarchs and of killing Ukrainians.
It's just unbelievable. I never could understand why Catholics voted Republican, almost like a religion. LifeSite News and Taylor Marshall were saying, if you don't vote Republican, you're committing a mortal sin. And yet the Republican Party, a good percent of them, are now in favor of letting the entire Christian nation of Ukraine get wiped off the map, which is not a Catholic agenda point. That's a Rothschild agenda point. And I don't know how you can say that in the name of opposing globalism, you could throw a country to the globalists and let it be destroyed by them one way or the other. That's not anti-globalism. But now I'm beginning to think that Catholics who are devout Republicans are really devout Republicans and not Catholics. They're really part of this misinformation program.
Yeah.
And let me see some other things. I saw some other crazy things that I've seen this week. Oh, Crisis Magazine saying we don't need Latin anymore. They should change the name to Excusing the Crisis Magazine. And Aid to the Church in Need is tweeting out images of the icon of Joseph and Our Lady holding the child Jesus with Saint Joseph touching Our Lady's hand, which is heresy. Because if you allow an image of Saint Joseph touching Our Lady, what are you going to teach the next generation? That Jesus is the natural son of Joseph.
Mhm.
And then that completely destroys any claim to Catholicism of having been founded by God. And you have Catholics doing this all over the place. That was forbidden under pain of excommunication before the council. You could not have any image of Joseph touching Our Lady or Our Lady touching Saint Joseph, because it's Our Lady did not know man. Then you have all this I call disinformation. All these people started to complain about things they haven't complained about in years. They're complaining about the election of Bergoglio now. Well, when the facts came out in 2014 about something wrong in the election of Bergoglio and the conclave, oh, no, you can't talk about that. Nope, you can't doubt that. Now, all of a sudden, they want to talk about problems in the conclave. Why? Because now it's obvious that Benedict is still the Pope, and they want to ignore from that. You know, and we've seen some good I've seen some good tweets from George Neumeyer, who's investigating clerical corruption in the United States. You might want to follow him on Twitter. I have to say something about Christine Niles. I love her work. She did something the day after Christmas that's just totally wrong. She tried to say that Saint Stephen forgave his enemies before his death, and therefore we should forgive our enemies before they repent. And she actually attacked the idea that it's wrong to refuse forgiveness before repentance. Okay, well, she probably doesn't know what she's doing, okay, because I don't think she has bad will, but she just doesn't think about what she's doing, because Saint Stephen didn't forgive his enemies before they repented. He prayed to God that God would forgive them. He prayed that, and what are the fathers and doctors of the church? He prayed to God that God might give them the grace to repent so that they can merit God's forgiveness. Because when we pray that God forgive our enemies, that's what we're praying for. Because God can't forgive someone who's not sorry. That's against justice. And we cannot pretend that a sinner has not offended us, because we're corrupting his conscience unless he repents of it and asks our forgiveness. And you can't forgive a person before that, or you could corrupt their conscience. So if you have a neighbor that's offended you, you can stop talking to him. St. Alphonsus says that. You can actually stop talking to him until he says, I'm sorry. And if he wants to have some business or affair to you, you can rightfully remind him of his offense and say, no, you chopped down my apple tree last year. I have nothing more to do to you unless you're sorry and you pay me the cost of the damage done. And then after that, if you ask my forgiveness as a Christian, I will consider forgiving you, but not before. Mm-hmm. And Christine Niles has put out one of the worst talking points, because if you break down that principle, you become psychologically capable of being manipulated by propaganda saying, oh, you're not a true Christian because you won't forgive your enemies even before they're sorry. Because the Masons will never be sorry for what they do to you, but they want you to forgive them for what they have. So, hey, Jay, what other news do you have?
She wasn't sorry for those who murdered her husband. She took justice.
Well, she hadn't yet become a Christian, but she did execute justice. So, and that wasn't vendetta because she was princess. She was the ruler, and so she had the right to exercise justice, self-defense. So, those are just some of the.
Yeah.
You have that. You're done. So we'll wrap up this first episode of True Catholicism. We won't always feature an individual. From time to time we will, but we'll talk about misinformation that's being spread on social media that is very damaging to anyone's faith if they accept these errors. And in all these cases, you're finding people who don't know their faith. They're not religious. They're not clergy. They haven't studied at Catholic institutions. They haven't even opened books in Latin. And they're telling you what to believe and stuff, and that's just so wrong. That is just so Protestant, that is. Just pay no attention to those people. They might have goodwill, but it doesn't mean they're putting out correct information. Okay, make that distinction. So thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV's program, Real Catholicism, for our first episode.
This is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.